The Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson is one of my favourite fantasy trilogies of all time. And what I'm particularly impressed with is how every book gets better than the one before. So in today's episode, I want to talk about Mistborn, the Hero of Ages, and how to write a great sequel. Hi, I'm Jed, and this is Daily Writing Advice. So, The Hero of Ages is a follow-up to Brandon Sanderson's first Mistborn novel, which is titled Mistborn, The Final Empire. And right off the bat, what I think is important about sequels is that it's not necessarily you trying to deliver a bigger and better version of the same thing that was in the first book, but rather it's about thinking about how you can deliver a completely different experience that builds upon the scaffolding you've created in the first book. So, for instance, the first book of the Mistborn trilogy is a heist story. It's about a small group of plucky thieves trying to bring down a corrupt government. The second book, on the other hand, is a very different kind of story. This is a story about, fundamentally, a siege. In this case, the heroes are no longer the plucky underdogs of this story world. Well, they're still kind of underdogs, but rather than being a small group, now they are a bigger group trying to defend an entire town. And this brings with it a completely different set of challenges, because when you only have a crew of, say, a dozen people to manage, it's a very different type of story to when you were trying to protect a whole city with thousands of people in it. So automatically, by just changing the scale, in that case, Sanderson creates a sequel that is fundamentally different to the first book, while still existing in the same world with the same characters. Having this difference allows him to create a story that feels so much fresher than if he just did a recreation, a beat-by-beat copy of the first book. Another interesting thing that he does with the Mistborn series in particular, and this is really pertinent for people doing fantasy books, is that he explores a different aspect of the magic system in the second book. So he talked about this in quite a few blog posts that he's written on the topic, but basically the first book is all about allomancy, which is this magic where by ingesting metals you gain certain types of powers. Book number 2, without spoiling anything, is about a completely different magic system that is also sort of related to the first one, but gives you more insights into how this world functions and how this magic system kind of corresponds and counteracts some aspects of allomancy. And then finally, book number 3, again, more vague because I don't want to give away spoilers for this one, but it's a different type of magic system again. So we have 3 books in the trilogy, and each book kind of serves as a bit of an exploration of a different type of magic. So this is one way that you could consider writing sequels in your book, even if it's not a fantasy book. You can explore different aspects of the world while still retaining a lot of the core cast. And in fact, that's one of the things that I really like about the Mistborn series. Well, I mean, I like a lot of things about it, but one of the things that makes it really interesting is how you have the same people who are responding to such different events in every book. First book, it's all about how do we bring down this person who has much more power than us, much more resources than us, with a small group of people. Second book is all about, okay, we've got a big group of people behind us now, but there's another big group of people who are attacking us. How do we coordinate? How do we actually organize this massive city to defend against an onslaught? And then the third book, without trying to spoil it too much, because I think the third book is definitely my favorite, it's a completely different problem. It's no longer human versus human problem, it's human versus world problem. And that's another way to consider series as well, is to think about how you can escalate the problems from, and not even escalate the problems, but just transition from different types of conflict. So you can have a book that's all about the human versus human conflict. You can have a book that's all about the human versus society conflict. You can have a book that's all about the human versus world conflict. And that sort of is what the Mistborn series is about in a lot of ways. It goes from being a certain type of micro conflict to a bigger type of conflict, and then to an even bigger type of conflict. So that was a bit of a rant about why I love the Mistborn series so much, and why I think The Heroes of Ages is a fantastic sequel to The Final Empire. So I hope that you found something useful in this bit of a riff here in terms of structuring perhaps the second or third book in your series. I should say that I am yet to write a series as an author, although I do plan to write a sequel to Fires of the Dead, which is my first fantasy book at some stage in the future. So a lot of this episode was just me trying to figure out some tactics from one of my favorite books and see if I can learn some stuff from that and hopefully teach you at the same time. So that's our episode. Hope you've enjoyed it. Now go and write extraordinary stories. I'll see you next time.